In the quiet town of Willow Creek, nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, life moved at a slow pace. The streets were lined with modest homes, each with its own story to tell. One such home belonged to Ethan and Lily Carter, a young couple who had lived there for nearly 5 years. To their neighbors, they seemed like an ordinary pair. Ethan worked as a mechanic, while Lily was a part-time teacher at the local elementary school. But behind the closed doors of their cozy house lay a secret that would change everything. On a chilly autumn night, when the wind whispered through the trees and the moon hung low in the sky, something unusual happened. A strange object streaked across the heavens, leaving a trail of light before disappearing beyond the horizon. Moments later, a faint hum filled the air, growing louder until it reached a deafening pitch. Then, silence. The townsfolk barely noticed, brushing it off as a meteor or some distant storm. But Ethan and Lily felt it, a shift in the atmosphere, a presence that didn't belong. Unbeknownst to them, an alien scout ship had landed just outside their property. The visitors, known as the Vraxians, were not new to exploration. They had traveled across galaxies, conquering countless civilizations by exploiting their weaknesses. To the Vraxians, humans were primitive creatures, soft and fragile, easily dominated. This planet, rich with resources and unprepared for invasion, seemed ripe for the taking. What they didn't realize, however, was that this particular neighborhood housed something far more dangerous than they could have imagined. Inside the Carter home, Ethan sat on the couch, flipping through channels on the TV, while Lily prepared hot cocoa in the kitchen. The couple exchanged casual banter about their day, unaware of the intruders lurking nearby. In the basement below, 2 sets of glowing eyes watched silently from the shadows. Rook and Silva, the Carters' so-called pets, sensed the disturbance long before their human companions did. Their sleek feline-like bodies tensed, scales shimmering faintly in the dim light. Though they appeared calm, there was an undeniable energy radiating from them, a readiness to act if needed. Earlier that evening, Ethan and Lily had discussed whether keeping Rook and Silva was worth the risk. These creatures weren't ordinary animals. They were intelligent beings from another dimension, discovered during a hiking trip years ago. At first, the couple had been hesitant, unsure if they could care for such extraordinary entities. But over time, a bond formed, a mutual understanding that transcended words. Rook and Silva protected the Carters, and in return, the Carters provided them with shelter and companionship. It was a partnership unlike any other. As the hours passed, the Vraxian scouts began deploying drones to map the area. One drone hovered near the Carter residence, drawn by the warmth and activity within. Its mechanical whir went unnoticed by Ethan and Lily, but not by Rook. With lightning speed, he leaped from the basement window, his claws slicing through the drone's metal frame. Sparks flew as the device crashed to the ground, its cameras capturing only fragments of the creature responsible. Back inside, Lily heard the commotion and rushed to the window, pulling the curtains aside cautiously. She saw nothing but the dark outline of trees swaying in the breeze. "What was that?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. "Probably just the wind," Ethan replied, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. Little did they know, their lives, and the fate of their world, were about to take a dramatic turn. For the Vraxians, this was only the beginning of what would become their greatest challenge yet. And for Ethan, Lily, Rook, and Silva, it was the start of a battle that would test the limits of trust, courage, and survival. The next morning, Ethan and Lily woke up to an unusually quiet neighborhood. The usual sounds of birds chirping and children playing were absent, replaced by an eerie stillness that made the air feel heavier. Neither of them mentioned the strange noise from the night before, though both carried it in the back of their minds. As they went about their routine, Ethan heading out to his garage workshop and Lily preparing for her day, they tried to shake off the unease. But deep down, they knew something was different. Down in the basement, Rook and Silva were restless. Their glowing eyes darted around the dimly lit space, as if anticipating another threat. These creatures, though often calm and observant, had instincts far sharper than any humans. They had spent years adapting to life on Earth, but their predatory nature remained intact. To outsiders, they might have looked like oversized, otherworldly cats with shimmering scales and sinewy muscles. However, Ethan and Lily understood that Rook and Silva were far more complex than mere animals. They communicated through subtle movements and low growls, almost as if they shared a language of their own. Lily decided to check on them after breakfast. She descended the stairs slowly, carrying a tray of raw meat, a treat she occasionally prepared to keep them content. "Hey, you two," she said softly, placing the tray on the floor. Rook approached first, his movements graceful yet deliberate. He sniffed the food briefly before nudging Lily's hand with his head, a gesture that always reminded her of affection. Silva followed suit, though her golden eyes remained fixed on the small basement window, as if watching for something or someone. "What's gotten into you two?" Lily murmured, scratching behind Rook's ears. She noticed the faint scratches on the windowsill and frowned. "Did you break something last night?" Rook let out a low rumble, which Lily interpreted as a mix of acknowledgement and warning. It wasn't the first time they'd acted strangely, but there was an intensity now that worried her. She climbed back upstairs to tell Ethan about it, finding him tinkering with an old car engine in the garage. "Something's up with Rook and Silva," she said, leaning against the doorway. "They're acting, I don't know, protective." Ethan wiped his hands on a rag and turned to face her. "You think it has anything to do with that noise last night?" "I don't know," Lily admitted, "but whatever it was, it spooked them. And when they're spooked, we should probably pay attention." As the day wore on, the couple couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. When Ethan stepped outside to fetch tools from the shed, he scanned the tree line at the edge of their property. The forest seemed darker than usual, its shadows stretching unnaturally long despite the midday sun. He shook his head, chalking it up to paranoia, and returned to work. Meanwhile, several miles away, the Vraxian scout team reviewed the fragmented footage recovered from the destroyed drone. The images were blurry, but one thing was clear: something had attacked it. Something fast, strong, and unlike anything they had encountered before. Commander Zirk, the leader of the expedition, studied the footage with growing curiosity. His sharp features twisted into a scowl as he replayed the clip over and over. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered to his second-in-command, a wiry alien named Crix. "These humans are supposed to be primitive. What could they possibly have that can disable our technology so easily?" Crix hesitated before replying. "Perhaps it's not the humans themselves. Could there be another species involved? Something native to this planet?" Zirk dismissed the idea with a wave of his hand. "Highly unlikely. If such a creature existed, we would have detected it during our initial scans." Still, doubt gnawed at him. He ordered a ground team to investigate the site where the drone had been destroyed, instructing them to gather more data and eliminate any potential threats. Back at the Carter home, Ethan and Lily continued their day, unaware of the danger creeping closer. In the basement, Rook and Silva remained vigilant, their instincts screaming warnings neither human could fully comprehend. For now, the peace held, but it wouldn't last much longer. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the Carter property. Ethan and Lily had just finished dinner when they heard a soft knock at the front door. It was unexpected. No one ever visited this late. Exchanging puzzled glances, Ethan wiped his hands on a napkin and walked to the door. Through the peephole, he saw 3 figures standing on the porch. They were tall and lean, their skin a pale grayish hue that seemed almost translucent in the fading light. Their eyes glowed faintly, and their elongated limbs gave them an unsettling appearance. "Who are you?" Ethan asked cautiously, keeping the chain lock secured as he cracked the door open. "We mean no harm," one of the figures replied in a voice that sounded both calm and mechanical. "We are explorers seeking knowledge about your world." Ethan hesitated. Something about their tone didn't sit right with him. He glanced back at Lily, who stood frozen near the dining table, her face pale. Before either of them could respond, Rook appeared from the hallway, his glowing eyes narrowing as he assessed the strangers. Silva joined him moments later, her sleek form radiating tension. The two creatures moved closer to Ethan, positioning themselves protectively between him and the visitors. The tallest alien tilted his head slightly, studying Rook and Silva with undisguised interest. "What are these beings?" he asked, his voice betraying a flicker of unease for the first time. "They're ours," Ethan said firmly, stepping aside to close the door. "You need to leave." But the aliens didn't move. Instead, the leader raised a hand, revealing a small device strapped to his wrist. A beam of light shot out, scanning the interior of the house. Rook reacted instantly, lunging forward with incredible speed. The chain snapped under the force of the door swinging outward, and within seconds, Rook had pinned the leader against the railing of the porch. His claws gleamed dangerously close to the alien's throat, while Silva growled low, daring the others to intervene. Lily gasped, clutching the edge of the doorway. "Rook, stop," she called out, though her voice wavered. She trusted the creatures implicitly, but seeing them act so aggressively was startling. The alien leader struggled briefly before going still, clearly realizing resistance was futile. "Release me," he demanded, though there was a hint of fear beneath his composed exterior. Ethan stepped onto the porch, his expression hard. "Not until you explain why you're here, and why you thought it was okay to scan my home without permission." The alien hesitated, then nodded slightly. "Very well. We are representatives of the Vraxian Collective. Our mission is to evaluate your species' potential for assimilation into our empire. Your primitive nature suggested you would pose no challenge." Lily frowned. "Assimilation? You mean invasion?" The alien ignored her comment, his gaze shifting between Ethan and the creatures holding him captive. "These guardians of yours, what are they?" "That's none of your business," Ethan replied sharply. "Now get off our property, or else." For a moment, the alien seemed ready to argue, but the pressure of Rook's claws convinced him otherwise. With a curt nod, he signaled his companions to retreat. As they backed away, the leader spoke again. "This isn't over. You will see us again." Once the aliens disappeared into the darkness, Ethan closed the door and locked it securely. He turned to find Lily staring at Rook and Silva, her eyes wide with awe and concern. "Do you think they'll come back?" she whispered. "I don't know," Ethan admitted, running a hand through his hair. "But if they do, we've got more than just ourselves to worry about now." Rook let out a low rumble, as if agreeing. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain. The Carters and their extraordinary companions were no longer ordinary players in this game. The night grew colder as Ethan and Lily sat in the living room, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The encounter with the Vraxians left them shaken, but it also raised more questions than answers. Who were these aliens? Why had they come to Earth? And most importantly, how much did they know about Rook and Silva? The two creatures lay quietly on the floor, their glowing eyes occasionally flickering toward the windows as if expecting another attack. "We can't stay here like sitting ducks," Ethan said finally, breaking the silence. "If they come back, and they probably will, we need to be ready." Lily nodded, though her hands trembled as she clutched a cup of tea. "But what can we do? They're not exactly normal burglars we can scare off with a baseball bat." Ethan glanced at Rook and Silva. "We've got something they don't understand. Something that scares even them." His voice carried a mix of pride and uncertainty. While he trusted the creatures completely, he couldn't help but wonder if relying on them was enough. As if sensing his thoughts, Rook lifted his head and let out a soft growl. It wasn't threatening. It almost sounded reassuring, as if telling Ethan to have faith. Lily reached down to stroke Silva's smooth scales. "They've protected us this far," she said softly. "Maybe they're all the defense we need." Before they could discuss further, a loud thud echoed from outside. Both humans froze, their eyes darting toward the front door. Rook sprang to his feet immediately, followed by Silva. This time, there was no knocking, just the unmistakable sound of boots crunching against gravel. Someone, or something, was approaching the house. Ethan grabbed a flashlight from the side table and moved cautiously toward the window, careful to stay out of sight. Peering through the blinds, he saw several figures emerging from the shadows. The Vraxians had returned, and this time they weren't alone. Behind them stood a group of armored soldiers, each armed with sleek weapons that hummed with energy. "They brought reinforcements," Ethan whispered, stepping back quickly. "This isn't good." Lily swallowed hard. What do they want now? Before Ethan could respond, the leader of the Vraxians stepped forward, raising a hand to signal his team to stop. He spoke loudly enough for his voice to carry through the closed door. "We wish to speak with you again, humans. No harm will come to you if you cooperate." Ethan exchanged a glance with Lily. Neither of them trusted the alien's words, but ignoring him wasn't an option either. Slowly, Ethan opened the door, keeping Rook and Silva close behind him. The sight of the heavily armed soldiers made his stomach churn, but he forced himself to stay calm. "What do you want?" Ethan asked, his tone firm despite the tension gripping him. The alien leader gestured toward Rook and Silva. "These beings are unlike anything we have encountered. We demand to know their origins and purpose." "They're ours," Ethan replied without hesitation, "and they're not up for discussion." The alien's expression hardened. "You misunderstand. This is not a request. If you refuse to comply, we will take them by force." Rook growled low, his body coiling like a spring. Silva mirrored his stance, her sharp claws glinting in the dim light. The Vraxian soldiers shifted uneasily, clearly unnerved by the presence of the creatures. Even their leader took a cautious step back. Ethan crossed his arms. "Force. You think your weapons scare us. Let me show you what real power looks like." With that, he stepped aside, allowing Rook and Silva to step forward. Their glowing eyes locked onto the Vraxians, who hesitated under their gaze. For the first time, the invaders seemed unsure of themselves. Commander Zerk narrowed his eyes, weighing his options. "Very well," he said after a pause. "Perhaps a demonstration is in order. Allow one of our warriors to face your pets. If they win, we leave. If we win, you surrender them." Ethan looked at Lily, who gave a hesitant nod. Turning back to the aliens, he smirked. "Deal." The challenge was set, and the tension in the air grew thicker with every passing second. Ethan and Lily watched as the Vraxians cleared a space in the backyard, creating what looked like an impromptu arena. The aliens' weapons hummed softly, casting an eerie glow over the grass. Commander Zerk stood at the edge of the makeshift battleground, his sharp features twisted into a confident smirk. He gestured for one of his soldiers to step forward, a towering figure clad in reinforced armor, his weapon strapped to his side. Ethan and Lily exchanged uneasy glances. They trusted Rook and Silva completely, but this was different. These weren't ordinary opponents. They were advanced alien warriors, armed and dangerous. Still, there was no turning back now. Rook moved first, stepping onto the field with fluid grace. His shimmering scales caught the moonlight, making him look almost otherworldly. Silva remained close behind, her golden eyes locked on the Vraxian soldier. "Are you sure about this?" Lily whispered, clutching Ethan's arm tightly. "We don't have a choice," Ethan replied, though his voice betrayed a flicker of doubt. "If we back down now, they'll think we're weak. And if Rook wins, maybe it'll make them leave us alone." The Vraxian soldier raised his weapon, aiming it directly at Rook. But before he could fire, Commander Zerk held up a hand. "No energy weapons," he said firmly. "This will be a test of raw strength and skill." The soldier hesitated but eventually lowered his weapon, drawing instead a pair of gleaming energy blades that crackled with power. He took a wide stance, his glowing eyes fixed on Rook. To anyone else, The sight would have been terrifying. But Rook didn't flinch. Instead, he crouched low, his tail swishing behind him like a coiled spring. "Let the trial begin," Zerk announced, stepping back to join his team. For a moment, nothing happened. The Vraxian soldier stood motionless, waiting for Rook to make the first move. But Rook was patient, his glowing eyes never leaving his opponent. Then, without warning, the soldier charged, swinging his blades in wide arcs designed to intimidate. Rook dodged effortlessly, his movements faster than the eye could follow. Each time the blades came close, he slipped away, almost as if he were dancing around them. The soldier grew frustrated, his attacks becoming wilder and less precise. That's when Rook struck. With a sudden burst of speed, he lunged forward, his claws raking across the soldier's armored chest. Sparks flew as the metal screeched under the force of the blow. The soldier stumbled backward, stunned by the ferocity of the attack. Before he could recover, Rook pounced again, this time targeting the soldier's weapon. In seconds, the energy blades were torn from his grasp, clattering harmlessly to the ground. The soldier raised his fists, attempting to fight back, but Rook was relentless. A single swipe of his claws sent the warrior sprawling onto the grass, defeated. Silence fell over the battlefield. The Vraxians stared in disbelief, their confidence visibly shaken. Even Commander Zerk seemed taken aback, his usual composure faltering. Rook turned slowly, his glowing eyes locking onto the aliens as if daring them to try again. Ethan stepped forward, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "You wanted a demonstration. Well, here it is. Leave us alone, or face the consequences." Zerk clenched his jaw, clearly struggling to process what had just happened. Finally, he nodded sharply. "We will withdraw. For now." Without another word, the Vraxians retreated, disappearing into the shadows as quickly as they had come. Lily let out a shaky breath, leaning against Ethan for support. That was insane. Ethan managed a weak smile. "Yeah, but I think we just proved something important." Rook and Silva returned to their sides, their bodies relaxed once more. For tonight, the danger had passed. But both Ethan and Lily knew this was only the beginning. The victory was short-lived. As the Vraxians disappeared into the night, Ethan and Lily knew their troubles were far from over. The aliens had retreated, but not because they accepted defeat. They were planning something bigger. Rook and Silva seemed to sense it too, their glowing eyes scanning the horizon as if waiting for the next attack. The air felt heavier now, charged with an unspoken tension that neither human nor creature could ignore. "They'll be back," Ethan said quietly, breaking the silence. He stood on the porch, his arms crossed as he stared at the dark tree line where the Vraxians had vanished. That wasn't just a test, it was a warning. Lily joined him, wrapping her arms around herself against the chill. "What do we do until then? We can't fight off an entire army, not even with Rook and Silva." Ethan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "We don't have to fight them alone. Someone needs to know what's happening here. If these aliens are serious about invading Earth, people deserve to be prepared." Lily frowned. "Who would believe us? Two regular people saying aliens are real. And oh, by the way, we've got superpowered monsters living in our basement." "It sounds crazy, I know," Ethan admitted. "But we can't keep this to ourselves anymore. Not after tonight." Before they could decide on their next move, a low hum filled the air. It started faintly, almost like the buzz of insects, but quickly grew louder. Ethan and Lily exchanged worried glances before rushing inside to check on Rook and Silva. The creatures were already alert, their bodies tense as they prowled near the windows. Outside, the sky lit up with strange green lights, pulsing rhythmically like a heartbeat. "What is that?" Lily whispered, clutching the edge of the curtain. Ethan didn't answer. His eyes widened as a massive ship descended from the clouds, hovering ominously above the forest. It was shaped like a jagged blade, its surface covered in glowing panels that cast eerie shadows across the ground. This wasn't a scout team. It was a full-scale invasion force. The Vraxian leader, Commander Zerk, appeared on the front lawn moments later, flanked by dozens of soldiers. Their weapons hummed with energy, and their expressions were cold and determined. This time, there was no negotiation, only orders. "You have defied the Vraxian collective," Zerk declared, his voice amplified so it echoed through the quiet neighborhood. "Your insolence will not go unpunished." Ethan stepped outside, keeping Rook and Silva close behind him. "You picked the wrong planet to mess with," he shot back, trying to mask his fear with bravado. Zerk smirked. "Brave words for someone so insignificant. But your pets cannot save you from what comes next." Without warning, the soldiers opened fire. Bright beams of energy streaked toward the house, shattering windows and setting parts of the yard ablaze. Ethan shouted for Lily to take cover, but she was already moving, grabbing a flashlight and anything else she could use as a weapon. Inside, chaos erupted as debris rained down, and smoke filled the air. Rook and Silva sprang into action. With speed and precision, they darted between the blasts, closing the distance between themselves and the attackers. One soldier raised his weapon, only for Silva to leap onto him, knocking him to the ground with a single swipe of her claws. Another aimed at Rook, but the creature teleported instantly, reappearing behind the soldier and disarming him before he could react. Despite their efforts, the Vraxians kept coming, their numbers overwhelming. Ethan and Lily fought alongside their companions, using whatever tools they could find to hold off the invaders. For every alien Rook and Silva took down, two more seemed to take their place. The battle stretched on, turning the once peaceful suburb into a war zone. As the fight wore on, Ethan realized they couldn't win this alone. They needed help, and fast. But who would believe them? And even if they did, would anyone arrive in time? The battle raged on, and the Carter home was beginning to crumble under the relentless assault. Flames licked at the edges of the house, and shattered glass littered the ground. Ethan and Lily worked tirelessly, throwing whatever they could find. Tools, furniture, even pots and pans, at the advancing Vraxians. But no matter how many soldiers Rook and Silva took down, more kept coming, their weapons firing beams of energy that left scorch marks on the walls and ground. Ethan ducked behind an overturned table as a blast narrowly missed him. His heart pounded in his chest, but he forced himself to stay focused. "Lily," he shouted over the chaos. "We need to call for help." Lily nodded, her face streaked with soot and sweat. She scrambled toward the living room, where their old landline phone still sat on a side table. Her hands trembled as she dialed 911, praying someone would answer. To her relief, a dispatcher picked up almost immediately. There's an attack happening at our house," Lily stammered, gripping the phone tightly. "Aliens. They're trying to invade. Please, you have to send someone." There was a long pause on the other end. "Ma'am, are you sure you're okay? This sounds like a prank." "It's not a prank," Lily interrupted, desperation creeping into her voice. "I know it sounds crazy, but you need to believe me. We're at 24 Willow Creek Lane. Hurry." The dispatcher hesitated before agreeing to send help, though Lily could tell she didn't fully believe them. Hanging up, she rushed back outside, where Ethan was doing his best to hold the line. Rook and Silva were everywhere at once, their movements a blur as they tore through the Vraxian ranks. Despite their efforts, the aliens' numbers seemed endless. "They're sending backup," Lily told Ethan breathlessly. "But I don't think they'll get here in time." Ethan clenched his jaw. "Then we'll just have to hold out until they do." Rook let out a low growl, drawing everyone's attention to the sky. The massive Vraxian ship above them had begun deploying smaller pods, each carrying more soldiers. It was clear the invaders weren't going to stop until the Carters and their companions were eliminated. Suddenly, Silva darted forward, her golden eyes glowing brighter than ever. She unleashed a burst of energy from her body, creating a shockwave that knocked several soldiers off their feet. The move stunned the Vraxians, giving Ethan and Lily a brief moment to regroup. "What was that?" Ethan asked, staring at Silva in awe. "I don't know," Lily admitted, "but it's like they're showing us what they're really capable of." As the fight continued, neighbors began to emerge from their homes, drawn by the commotion. At first, they stayed at a distance, watching in horror as the alien forces attacked. But when one brave man, a retired firefighter named Greg, grabbed a garden hose and sprayed water at a group of Vraxians, others followed suit. Soon, the entire neighborhood was rallying together, using whatever tools they had to defend themselves. Even with the added help, the odds remained stacked against them. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, the distant wail of sirens pierced the night air. Emergency vehicles sped down the street, followed by military trucks. Soldiers poured out, armed with advanced weaponry designed to counteract the alien threat. Commander Zerk barked orders to his troops, clearly unprepared for such resistance. For the first time, doubt flickered across his face. He glanced at Rook and Silva, who stood protectively beside Ethan and Lily, their glowing eyes daring him to continue. "This isn't over," Zerk snarled, signaling his forces to retreat. The Vraxians boarded their pods and ascended back into their ship, which disappeared into the clouds as quickly as it had arrived. Exhausted but alive, Ethan and Lily sank to the ground, surrounded by their neighbors and the creatures who had saved them. They had survived for now, but both knew this was only the beginning of a much larger war. The aftermath of the battle left Willow Creek in a state of shock. The once quiet neighborhood was now scared by burned grass, shattered windows, and the lingering smell of smoke. Emergency crews worked tirelessly to clean up the mess, while military personnel secured the area, their faces grim as they assessed the damage. Ethan and Lily sat on the steps of their battered home, wrapped in blankets provided by paramedics. Though physically unharmed, the weight of what had just happened hung heavily over them. Rook and Silva lay nearby, their glowing eyes dimmed but still watchful. They seemed exhausted, their sleek bodies streaked with dirt and ash. Neighbors approached cautiously, some thanking the creatures for their bravery, others staring in awe at the beings who had saved them all. For the first time, Rook and Silva weren't hidden away. They were heroes. As the adrenaline faded, reality began to sink in. A group of government agents arrived, led by a stern-looking woman named Agent Monroe. She introduced herself briefly before pulling Ethan and Lily aside for questioning. Her tone was calm but firm, her sharp eyes studying every detail of their expressions. "Start from the beginning," she said, pulling out a notepad. "Who, or what, are these creatures? And why do aliens want them?" Ethan hesitated, glancing at Lily. This was the moment they had feared, explaining something that sounded impossible. But there was no turning back now. Slowly, they recounted the story, how they had found Rook and Silva years ago during a hike, how the creatures had become part of their family, and how they had protected the Carters and the entire neighborhood from the Vraxians. Agent Monroe listened without interrupting, though her skepticism was obvious. When they finished, she crossed her arms. "You expect me to believe that two animals are capable of taking down an advanced alien force?" Before Ethan or Lily could respond, Rook rose to his feet, his glowing eyes locking onto Agent Monroe. With deliberate movements, he stepped forward and let out a low growl. It wasn't threatening. It felt more like a challenge. Silva joined him, her golden gaze steady and unwavering. "They're not just animals," Lily said quietly. "They're intelligent, and they've been protecting us since the day we met them." To prove their point, Ethan called Rook closer. To everyone's surprise, the creature obeyed instantly, sitting beside Ethan like a loyal companion. Agent Monroe watched silently, her expression softening slightly. Finally, she nodded. "We'll need to study them further to understand their abilities and origins." "No," Ethan said firmly. "They're not experiments. They're our family." Agent Monroe raised an eyebrow. "Be reasonable. If what you say is true, these creatures could be humanity's best chance against future attacks. We can't afford to ignore that. Before the argument could escalate, one of the soldiers interrupted, holding up a damaged Praxian device. "Ma'am, we've recovered intel from the invaders. Looks like they were planning another assault, one bigger than this." The news sent a ripple of unease through the group. Ethan and Lily exchanged worried glances. If the Vraxians returned in greater numbers, even Rook and Silva might not be enough to stop them. "We need to prepare," Agent Monroe said, her voice firm. "And we need allies. These creatures may be powerful, but they can't fight alone." Ethan looked at Rook and Silva, then back at the agents. "Fine, but we're involved too. Whatever happens next, we're not leaving their side." Agent Monroe studied him for a moment before nodding. "Agreed. For now, we'll work together. But this changes everything, for all of us." As the agents began coordinating with local authorities, Ethan and Lily realized their lives would never be the same. The world now knew about Rook and Silva, and soon it would know about the threat looming beyond the stars. Together, they vowed to protect not just their home, but the entire planet.